We have this ever-growing conflict in front of us, the Israel-Iran conflict. Will the United States get involved? Will the United States decide to use bunker-busting bombs? As I've said once and I'll say again, President Trump has beyond earned our trust on all foreign affairs issues. He took out Soleimani. He took out ISIS. He has bombed the Houthis. President Donald Trump has been a leader who is willing to use American military might where necessary, but not for prolonged conflicts. He's not a nation builder guy. He's not a let's change the population sentiment guy. There's only one nation that Donald Trump wants to build, and that is America. He wants to rebuild this country with infrastructure, a border, rising wages to get rid of inflation, mass deportations. President Donald Trump is focused on pouring money back into America. He's focused like a laser beam on that. And President Trump has earned our trust on all things foreign affairs. So right now you have Lindsey Graham, you have James Lankford, you have Tom Tillis. They're calling for regime change. They're calling for regime change, but a step before that, almost the entire industrial media class right now is calling for a bombing of Fordo. Sounds good. But I think it's time that we get a couple answers. And we, the American people, deserve answers to this because after the 2020 election, after COVID, remember 2020, most secure election in history, everything was wonderful. Oh, really? We all know the truth there. How about COVID? 6 feet to slow the spread, vaccine is safe and effective, shut down the schools, mask while you shower. COVID came from a bat. So we were lied to there by the mass media and lied to there by the intelligence agencies. How about Joe Biden's mental decline? Joe Biden's perfectly fine. He's perfectly fit. It's a deep fake. You're wrong. He's never been sharper. How about the Hunter Biden laptop? That is Russian disinformation that our own intel community signed a letter saying that it was Russian disinformation. Our own intel community did that. Well, I'm sorry. That very same intel community should probably be questioned and challenged because they're the ones that are now pushing to bomb Fordo. The very same intel community that told us that COVID came from a bat lab, and the very same intel community that is telling us that was Russia was the biggest threat ever, you're going to have to earn our trust. You might be right, but you're going to have to earn our trust on this one. We are not going to blindly trust the intel community based on the track record of the last 5 years. 2020 election, most secure election in history. COVID, 6 feet to slow the spread, safe and effective. So before we commit to another military operation in the Middle East, which might be the best decision, here are some questions that I'm curious about, that I think that we need to have answered. Do you know that Ronald Reagan had Team B? He had Team A and Team B. Team B, I learned this from Steve Bannon. Team B was a totally independent intel group that would analyze the intel the president was getting to double check to make sure the president wasn't being cross-wired by Team A, all of the intel experts. This is necessary. I think President Trump needs Team B immediately. Team B could be led by J.D. Vance. You could have Amaryllis Kennedy. You could have these incredible people that would double check what the intel agencies are saying to make sure that the President Trump's information flow is robust. And by the way, the president has such good instincts here, phenomenal instincts. I have no idea why the president all of a sudden is saying 2 weeks. Could it be that maybe he's just doing a little of a double beat? Maybe he just wants to make sure he gets all sides, no blind spots, because these very same intel agencies, even though that we have great people now running them, we have not rooted out all of the cockroaches. These are the very same intel agencies that targeted him and did Russiagate and went and did a foreign dossier funded by the Democrat National Committee while they were lying about it to go get a warrant against Donald Trump to displace him from becoming president. And President Trump hasn't forgotten that. That's why we must trust President Trump. But I have put together a list here, and it's a working list of some things that we, the American people, deserve to know. And if you get angry as I go through this list, I'm really suspicious as to why. We deserve answers to this. And maybe some of these things we don't know. Maybe the answers are there's a high risk. We don't, and that's fine. That is an acceptable answer. Just be honest and tell us the truth. Because there were lies about the invasion of Afghanistan. There were lies about the Iraq war. There were lies about the Libya civil war. There were lies about the Syrian civil war. There were lies about what's happening in Ukraine. And so before we involve America in another military operation in the Middle East, which might be the right decision because Iran should not get a nuclear weapon, here are some answers to some questions. If Fordo is hit with an American bunker buster, will it totally take out Iran's nuclear capability? What is an approximation chance that it will? Will the bunker buster actually work? And secondly, what percentage chance that it will take out the entire nuclear program of Iran? I was talking to some people, and they said, oh, this will be the death blow of the nuclear program of Iran. Is that right? Because I actually don't think that's true. Because we're told right now that Iran is 15 days out from a nuke if they want it, even after the Israeli strikes. Even after the strikes that Israel has had a week later, they're still 15 days out. Can we play that from the U.S. ambassador to the UN? Can we play that piece of tape, please, that we had? It's very powerful. I don't know what cut it is. 400.
Have avoided this conflict had they agreed to a deal that would have prevented them from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. But they refused to do so, choosing instead to delay and deny. We can no longer ignore that Iran has all that it needs to achieve a nuclear weapon. All it needs is a decision from their supreme leader. That is unacceptable, and this council must urge them to change course.
This is today. They're saying that the UN 15 days after Israeli airstrikes. Has anything changed since the airstrikes? I know that there was uranium enrichment facilities that were bombed. I know that nuclear scientists were taken out. The New York Times is reporting today that the 15-day timeline from Israeli intelligence shows that even after all of these airstrikes, they still might be able to get a nuclear weapon. So I will repeat, if Fordo is hit, will it totally take out Iran's nuclear capability, and what is the percentage chance that it will? And if it doesn't work, what is the plan? Here's another very heavy question. How many American troops might die in Iranian retaliatory strikes? You know, I was talking to somebody that was, watching cable news a lot, and they're very on board for Fordo. I said, American troops might die in response. They said, no, Iran doesn't have any missiles left. I said, well, no, that's not true, actually. They have 2,000 hypersonic ballistic missiles that are still raining terror over Israel, and we should pray for the peace of Jerusalem as Iran strikes hospitals. And there are over 40,000 American troops within ballistic missile range of Iran. So what are the estimates? Because you better believe the American military and the intel community, they run war games and estimates. What are the estimates of how many American troops will die if Iran responds after we bomb Fordo? So imagine a scenario where we bomb Fordo, it doesn't work, we tick off the Iranians, they then launch a ballistic missile at an American base, killing 100 Americans. How do we respond? Do we respond then with more bombing? I thought this was about a nuclear program. That's a very important question. If American troops were to die in the response of the Iranian ballistic missile attack, what then would our response be? More escalation? Troops on the ground? And how many Americans would potentially die in such a strike? I'm just beginning with this comprehensive list that we as Americans deserve answers to after we have been lied to so repeatedly. You better believe President Trump understands this better than anybody else.